strong socialist. So when he's in college, Mussolini decides that he wants to do more than just, talk about it and just, I don't know, hang out with his friends and discuss it. He wants to do action. But Italy is not really big. The socialist movement in Italy wasn't really strong. So he decided to move to a place that had a really strong, college-level movement in socialism, and that's actually Switzerland. Now, we're talking, this is the late 1800s. There's a big socialist movement in Switzerland, so Mussolini, when he's college age, like you, next year, moves to Switzerland and gets really active in their protests. And in fact, he's actually one of the ones that starts a lot of the protests. The problem is, a lot of his protests turn violent and cause destruction. So in one of the protests, they arrest a bunch of the protesters, and they're like, "Who organized this?" And they're all like, and so Mussolini gets thrown in jail, and when they realize that he's not even Swiss, they're like, "What are you doing in our country?" And he's like, "The socialists, we will take over." And they're like, "Yeah, you're being deported." So he's arrested in Switzerland and then deported back to Italy. So he decided once he came back that he really needed to make a difference. He needed to get the socialists in Italy to band together and to really start action. And the one thing about Italy, they're very educated and they all read a lot. And he found a socialist newspaper, and he's actually really good with words. So he got himself a job as a journalist for this socialist newspaper and rose up really quickly to become the editor. And so back in Italy, he becomes a political journalist, and he's a very, very strong socialist. But he's a very good writer. So what is happening is, through the spread of this newspaper, a lot, especially of the younger, of the college-age kids in Italy, are starting to read his newspaper articles and are starting to think that maybe socialism isn't such a bad thing. I mean, because in true socialism, you wouldn't have this super rich elite and then everyone else. You would have a lot more, because the government would control everything, so a lot more of everyone on the same page. So he started to win over a lot of people to socialism. And so the Socialist Party loves him. And he's really active in the party, and everything's going great until World War I. Italy joins World War I, and the socialists are like, "This is a bad idea. It's going to split our country. We should not be involved in this war." So the Socialist Party took a stand against the war. And then, you kind of already know the story, but a year later, Italy switches sides. And so now they're fighting against Austria-Hungary, and they're fighting against Germany. And the Socialist Party is still very actively against the war. But Mussolini, throughout the first year of the war, is starting to see that the war could be really good for Italy. It could unite Italy and make them stronger, especially now that they're fighting on the side that's kind of winning. They could gain land, gain whatever from the losers. This is an opportunity. So Mussolini took a stand in favor of Italy being in this war and moving up, becoming stronger in the war. And the socialists get really mad at him. Dude, you're totally contradicting what we stand for. So the socialists do not want to join the war or be in the war, but Mussolini does. And because he's got such a following, he convinces a number of the socialists that, yeah, you're right, we should be taking a stand. So the leaders of the Socialist Party get mad at Mussolini and, kick him out of the party. You can't be part of our party. You're splitting us. You're factioning us. So they kick him out. So now that he's kicked out of the party, he's fired from the newspaper, and he realized that if he really wants to make a difference, and he really wants Italy to be successful, he needs to join the military. He is not a military kid. So he joins the military in hopes then that he can help in the military to make Italy stronger. And he rises up the ranks very quickly because he has such a power to motivate. And he gets a lot of the military guys on board with socialism and unites them. And he's very effective. He's a very effective communicator, very effective motivator. So he joins the military, And while in the military, he meets a number of fascists and realizes that this is the best thing for Italy. So fascists believe, which is one of your sacraments, right, in the power of the nation or even of a leader over the rights of an individual. That as just a member of the military, what you should be fighting for is the greatness of Italy. What all of us should be striving for is the greatness of Italy, to make Italy great. It's what he's always believed. It's why he thought we should join the war. So he becomes a fascist. So then after the war, Italy, yes, they're on the winning side, but since they weren't on the winning side the whole time, when they're doing the Versailles Treaty and they're like cutting up all the parts, the losers, Austria-Hungary, dismantling it, and dismantling Poland, and doing all these things, a lot of countries gain land and gain a lot from the war, and Italy is not one of them. They don't even get the reparations that Germany's supposed to pay the people who defeated them. So Italy didn't gain what Mussolini was really hoping for in the Versailles Treaty. And he's disappointed that Italy wasn't seen as equal to these other powerful nations in dealing with this. Unfortunately, though, Italy did pay a high price, not just in lives, but in money. And they're not going to get reparations from Germany. So Italy plunges into a recession. A lot of people are unemployed. This is my sad-face Italians. I could have put sad-face farmers too, but it's not just the farmers, though. It's everyone in Italy is struggling. And Mussolini blames the government. This is your fault. You are the cowards who didn't, stand up for us in Versailles. I can't believe you. You're awful. And, the socialists, this is your fault, too. You didn't even want to be in this war. You factioned Italy. So he forms his own political party. And we'll call it the Fascist Party. The idea is Italy above everything else. Everything we should be working for, that the government should be working for, that you as a worker should be working for, that the military should be working for. Everything should be to benefit Italy as a country. The problem is you still have socialists. You have communists now in Italy. You have all of these varying political parties in Italy. There are so many. And the fascists are but one party. And not a very big one. Even though he has a lot of followers, especially in the military, if you look at the whole nation of Italy, he doesn't have anywhere close to a majority. So what the fascists under Mussolini started doing is they started running in local elections, running for mayor, running for councilman, running for local positions. But because they're not a very big party, they wouldn't win a lot of the elections. So Mussolini had to change his strategy a little. And he created this sort of subgroup within the fascists that will become known as the Black Shirts. And they're known as the Black Shirts because they wore black shirts.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? So everyone, when you saw a group of men approaching a political rally for the socialists, the socialists were having a political rally, hey everyone, this is what we stand for, blah, here, have a teddy bear, whatever. This is great. While they're doing that, you would see this group of men in black shirts, and it got to the point where everybody knew what that meant. They were there to disrupt the rally through violence. And they would throw things at protesters, not protesters, supporters, people who were there for the rally. They'd throw things at them, in some cases just beat the crap out of them, throw things at the candidates. So it got to the point where a lot of candidates refused to hold rallies because they were afraid that the black shirts would show up. But if you don't hold rallies, you don't gain supporters. But the fascists would have a rally, and people would come to that rally. And the black shirts wouldn't show up to disrupt that rally. So they're gaining in popularity through fear. Because candidates were afraid to run against the fascists. So the black shirts were terrorizing political opponents of the fascists. This is illegal. But if the police showed up, oftentimes the black shirts would already have disappeared or conveniently taken off their black shirt. They're not wearing a black shirt. Oh, it's like Superman. I'm not Superman. All right, but anyways, this is how Mussolini started to get more support, and it's through intimidation, but it's working. Unfortunately, though, Italy is growing worse in the recession. The recession's turning into a depression, and you have unemployment is skyrocketing, and the government is unable to cope with all of this. So the prime minister of Italy is the one who's supposed, like our president, he's the one who everyone kind of blames, like, this is all your fault. So he quit, and they put another prime minister in. And this new prime minister, none of their names matter. This new prime minister is trying. He's trying to figure out a way to do things, but it's unsuccessful. I mean, it is hard to get a country out of a depression. Look at Roosevelt. It's hard, no matter what you try. So, in 1922, oh, this is my sad face Italy again. In 1922, the people are mad at this new prime minister because he hasn't been able to fix the problem. So he agreed to resign. He officially resigns, but then stays there, acting as the prime minister. At least until, the king or the people choose a new one. So he's there, but he's not officially the prime minister. So Mussolini and the fascists decide, since there technically is not a real prime minister in charge, it's time for us to take over. So he organized his black shirts and his friends in the military to form this paramilitary group that are going to storm into Rome and take over. And the prime minister, or the acting prime minister, finds out about it and writes an order to place Rome under siege, which means they would cut off all the roads with the military so that the fascists couldn't storm in. So he wrote the order out, assembling the military in Rome to, protect Rome from the fascist takeover. So he writes this order to basically place Rome under siege. All it needs is the king's signature. And so he goes to the king, the prime minister, goes to the king, and the king refuses to sign it. And the prime minister's like, but if you don't sign it, I can't do it. And then the fascists will move in. And the king will be like, not my problem. So the prime minister does not get permission to do this, so he can't order the siege of Rome. So none of the roads are blocked, and Mussolini saw this as his sign. So he marches into the city with his group of military guys and crazies behind, black shirts behind him, and they just march into Rome. Then he receives a letter from the king. So Mussolini goes to the king, and the king says, Mussolini, I would like you to form a cabinet. And he's like, am I now the prime minister? And the king says, if you would like the job. And he was like, I would like the job. And the king said, then you are. So Mussolini becomes the prime minister with the blessing of the king. And people, and still today, historians argue, why would the king do this? Everyone knows that he's a radical fascist. Was the king a radical fascist? Well, he's the king of Italy. Of course he wants Italy to be the greatest country. But historians disagree on this one. I wish I had a historian's degree for you to do on this one. The argument is, was he afraid of Mussolini? Better to be king with Mussolini in charge than have Mussolini take over and kick him out. Or did he really believe Mussolini wants what's best for Italy, what's best for me is what's best for Italy? We don't know. Anyways, either way, the king gave his blessing though. So the prime minister ordered a siege, but the king refused and then asked Mussolini to take over. Now, Mussolini refers to this as the March on Rome. Historians refer to it as the March on Rome too. The thing is, it was not an armed conflict takeover of Rome. It was them literally marching into Rome. And then the king handing it to Mussolini. Later, in the future, Mussolini, it's like Mussolini, but not really. Mussolini will look back and say, and we stormed Rome, and we took over. And people who are there are like, yeah, that didn't exactly happen, but no one's going to say anything to Mussolini because he'll just execute him. So, this goes down in history as the March of Rome. It sounds so dramatic. But it's okay. So now Mussolini is the prime minister, and he creates what we call a police state, where he basically makes everything under martial law. And now you will obey the military. And his friends in the military, which he had many from his time in the military, will now become the leaders and will make sure that everything's under martial law. And so it's not exactly a friendly country. People are not like, yay, Mussolini took over. But it is what it is, and now they have Mussolini as their leader. And now his goal is to make Italy the greatest nation on earth. And we will see what he does tomorrow when we do the world in the 30s. Okay, completely shifting gears. We're going to Joseph Stalin, which is not his real name, but we're going to call him Stalin because that's the name he called himself, which means man of steel. Alright, so, as a kid, our guy Stalin is a little troublemaker. Always in trouble. Like, one of those kids who just can't be controlled by his parents. His parents tried everything, they tried beating him, that doesn't work. He's still like this little troublemaker who gets like expelled from every school. Excuse me. So finally, when he's like 15, his parents apply to all the Catholic schools. Those nuns, man. I don't know if any of you went to Catholic school. They'll keep you in line, man. Those rulers and your knuckle. And so they apply to all the Catholic schools, and they're all like, no, you have to, you have to meet this, you have to meet this, you have to meet this, you have to be super smart, you have to do whatever. And Stalin wasn't dumb. I mean, he was smart, but he just got kicked out of so many schools that really none of the Catholic schools wanted him, which I don't blame them. Until one school said, okay, we'll try it.
Did he just have like an authority problem?
He does. Totally has a problem with authority. Absolutely. Like his whole life. Until he's in authority. Then he doesn't have a problem with himself. Alright, so finally he gets a scholarship to a Catholic school when he's 16. It's this really strict seminary. Like, these kids are going there to be priests. And they really thought they could change him. So he gets the scholarship. I'm sure his parents probably were like thanking God every day to go to this seminary. And according to Stalin, within a year of being there, he became an atheist. So it didn't exactly have the effect I think that everyone wanted. But that's also at 16, the time when he really found out about Karl Marx and started reading everything Karl Marx wrote about life, about, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. So he's really, really into that, started joining meetings, started going to all this stuff. So his final exams come, and he doesn't show up. Now this is a prestigious school where people apply to come here. So he gets expelled from the school. And he claims it has nothing to do with the fact that he skipped his finals. He claims it was a conspiracy. This should already tell you that his paranoia, like, dude, you didn't go to your exams. You became an atheist. Like, at what point of this is it a conspiracy? Like, you're no longer Catholic, so why go to a Catholic school that's preparing people for the priesthood? And you didn't show up for your finals. Of course they're going to kick you out. They kick everyone out who doesn't show up. But he claimed it was a conspiracy. And this whole life will claim this. That this was all a conspiracy against me. But then he finds out about this sort of underground movement called the Bolsheviks, being led by Vladimir Lenin. What do they want? Well, Lenin was a follower of Karl Marx as well. What do they want to do? They want to down with the Tsar. They want socialism. They want communism. They want the government to take over, be controlled by everyone. Power to the workers. And so, Lenin was a follower of Marx. So Stalin, at the age of 16, being kicked out of this school, joins them. And Lenin, who's much older, saw very quickly that young Stalin could be useful. He was energetic, he was enthusiastic, he's willing to do anything. Now, when I say anything, I really do mean anything. So, God, we need money. How are we going to get money? Stalin's like, I got this. Okay. What does he do? He robs a bank. Comes back, I brought you your money. Lenin's like, where'd you get the money? He's like, it doesn't matter. Lenin's like, you're right. Lenin knew. He knew that Stalin was always breaking the law to get stuff done. Oh, God, this guy over here is such a problem for us. Stalin's like, I'll take care of it, don't you worry. And Lenin's like, okay. Suddenly the guy has an accident. Oh, he fell off a cliff. What was he doing at the cliff? I don't know, but he fell off. And Lenin would be like, okay. Stalin was willing to do anything for his party. Anything for the Bolsheviks. And Lenin used him for that. So he uses Stalin to do the stuff that other people aren't willing to do. To get his hands dirty the way other people aren't willing to get their hands dirty. But Lenin also saw very quickly that Stalin was hard to control. Like, giving him this stuff to do made Stalin feel important and made him, like, behave. But Lenin could see that Stalin had an issue with authority and that Stalin was hard to control. So in 1917 and 18 is the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks take over. The Tsar is kicked out of power. He abdicates the throne and then arrested and is killed. And Lenin and the Bolsheviks create a communist Russia. So for the next few years, Stalin's task now is to make Russia, help Lenin make Russia into a communist country, shut down all the churches, which Stalin did happily shut all the churches down. All of them. Every church shut down. But in the next few years, Lenin can also start to see that Stalin is getting power hungry. And it is a problem. The problem with Lenin, though, is that he is incredibly sick. He will suffer several heart attacks and know that his time is limited. And in 1924, Lenin will die. But before he died, when he realized that the next one's probably going to kill him, he wrote a letter where he basically outlined what he wanted to happen if he passed. And that was that he wanted Trotsky to take over, that Lenin was power hungry, and that was too unpredictable. And he wrote Lenin, those are Lenin's words. And then Lenin died. And so people that were Lenin's close friends were like, well, this was his wishes that Trotsky becomes the new leader. And Stalin was like, it should be me. I'm the one who followed his vision. I am the one who can get things done. And again, Lenin's close friends were like, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted Trotsky. So they gave Trotsky the power of Russia, and Stalin is furious, my angry-faced Stalin. And Stalin never accepted Trotsky as the leader and will turn against him. But Trotsky has the support of the majority of the party, the Communist Party of Russia. So Stalin will struggle for the next few days or next few years of how to gain control. But finally, in 1927, he will turn on Trotsky, and he will literally go after him and send assassins to kill him. Now, Trotsky was lucky. He was forewarned about what was going on, the treachery going on, and so he fled the country and went to Mexico. And Stalin sent assassins after him and assassinated him in Mexico, so he could never come back. And now there is no one to question Stalin and his authority. So Stalin takes it. And so he overthrows Trotsky, makes sure that Trotsky is dead. But then he rules by a state of fear. He created labor camps, which are like concentration camps where you are sent to do work, and filled them with anyone he thought caused him any kind of possible problem. So anyone within his own party that he feared was sent to the labor camps. All the priests that had lost their jobs when they shut the churches down, he still considered them a potential threat. He had them all arrested and sent to the labor camps. And if you're sent to the labor camp, you're sent there to work. You're sent there to stay. Now, for workers, the threat was, this is the goal for your factory. If you reach the goal, you will be rewarded. If you do not reach the goal, every one of you is sent to a labor camp for a year. The goals were always impossible. Always. They were like, these expectations were ridiculous. The problem is you understood that if you didn't reach that goal, you're going to a labor camp. So you know what? You're supposed to get off at 4? Yeah, you'll stay till 8. You'll stay till 9. You will reach that goal. I'm not going to a labor camp. And you know what? It helped with productivity. Productivity jumped. Russia came out of the Depression more than anyone else did. It's a good incentive. It's called fear. You're afraid. And that's how Stalin, that's like Lenin and Stalin, that's how Stalin kept control. People feared him. But he's paranoid. And he thinks everyone's always talking about him, which they probably are, because he's crazy. 20 million. Just an FYI, just, random number. 20 million people will die in the labor camps. So it's a phenomenal number. But it's over 20 years. So it's a little different than when we get to the Holocaust, where you have 12 million who die in just a very short time. This one's prolonged. But he is not a nice person. He's also very paranoid. Just like his whole theory that it was a conspiracy why he was expelled from the Catholic school. Now that he is the leader, because he is the one who overthrew Trotsky, he thinks that everyone wants to overthrow him. So he's always looking for any possible person who might just have the power to overthrow him. And then he would send them to a labor camp. But then you have the people who were Lenin supporters. They're like untouchable. Like if he killed them or sent them to a labor camp, they would become martyrs. Like people would turn against Stalin. You can't turn against Lenin's friends. So Stalin had to come up with another way to get rid of them. And so he did. It's referred to in 1934 as the Great Purge. He had old Bolsheviks that were Lenin's friends. High-ups in the army, people he didn't think he could trust. Anyone who was untouchable and could pose a threat to him, he had them arrested and put on a public trial. So the main ones I want you to know are the old Bolsheviks and army heroes. People who are really untouchable and would become martyrs if you just killed them or sent them to a labor camp. He had them arrested and put on trial, public trials, where they would be basically accused of being disloyal to Stalin. And you had all these old Bolsheviks who were Lenin's friends, who were like, I have never betrayed Stalin. I have never done anything against Stalin. And they were like, the trial will resume tomorrow. And that night, the old Bolsheviks would be told, look, here's the deal. You have to make the decision. You will confess tomorrow publicly of disloyalty to Stalin, or your family will be sent to the labor camp. Your wife and your daughters will be tortured. The choice is yours. Now, disloyalty to Stalin is execution. That's the punishment. So you are asking these men to make a choice to agree to be executed or to have their wives and daughters tortured and their sons sent to labor camps. They all agreed. All right, I'll confess. And so tomorrow, they publicly confessed, I have to admit, I have been disloyal. And the punishment was always execution. And they were executed. And publicly they had confessed to disloyalty. And it spread a very strong message that disloyalty to Stalin is dangerous. And this is how he ruled until the day he died, the sphere. And we will have to deal with him very soon, but not yet. We have one more to settle with, and that is Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. Okay, so there's all these rumors, and you'll see them online all the time about, well, I mean, it's really weird that Hitler did all this stuff because he was part Jewish. Okay, whatever site you are getting that information from is not a valid site. Here is the truth about Adolf Hitler's lineage. His dad, Alois Hitler, was born to a single mom. This is the mid-1800s. A single mom. Like, she was like, it's like the Scarlet Letter. She was like, everyone was like, ugh. And we don't really know who Adolf Hitler's dad really was. There's like 3 or 4 possibilities, but apparently, like, Adolf Hitler's mom was with several men. So, we don't know who Adolf Hitler's grandfather is. He's the question. That's why people are like, he might have been part Jewish. But we don't know. There's like no evidence of this, like 0. So there's a possibility there. So Adolf Hitler's dad then, who grew up as a single kid with no dad, was made fun of all the time in school because he didn't have a daddy. And so he was like, I will make you all pay. Of course, he lives in a town of like 2,000 people, so it's not like there's a lot you can do to make them all pay. So he studies really hard, this is dad, and he ends up being the customs official. That's what he wants, like, his children to be, customs officials. So his wife, his first wife, Adolf Hitler's dad's first wife, has a kid, and then gets paralyzed, and Adolf Hitler's dad has an affair with the nanny, and so the wife gets mad and sues him, and then she dies, and he marries the nanny, and then the nanny gives birth to their child because she's already pregnant when they got married, and then she finds out, oh no, she dies in childbirth, and he marries the nanny who's already pregnant with his child. It's just like, Dad was like quite the womanizer. So finally, Dad ends up marrying his last nanny. And they have like 6 kids, one of which is Adolf. 2 die in childbirth, so there's really only 4. But Dad is incredibly abusive. He's a wife beater, kid beater, alcoholic, terrible person. So the older 2 boys, Hitler's the 3rd boy, the older 2 boys run away, and that leaves Adolf and his little sister and his mom to take all the abuse. And when Adolf Hitler, this is his story, he said when he was 11 years old, he read this book. That in the book there was a knight, like a sword fighting knight, who is captured by the enemy, and they torture him, and the knight never cries out because they could never break him. And Adolf Hitler read this book, and he was just like romanticized with this knight. He wanted to be this knight. The story goes, the next time Dad came home drunk and started beating him, he was 11, Adolf just took it, right? He's going to take it. He's going to be just like the knight. And his dad like beat him harder, and he wouldn't cry. And so his dad was like, now you are a man, and never beat him again. Of course, then he just beat his wife and his daughter instead. And Adolf would get really mad and would like stand in front of them, like because he wanted to protect his like mom and his little sister, whom he adored, both of them. But Dad was just a terrible person. Mom was really nice, and she was always like, Adolf, no, he'll hurt you. Just a nice person. So here we go. Dad abusive, mom is nice. All right. Hitler was not born in Germany. He is born in a small town, same small town as his dad, Braunau. You don't need to know that, but he is born in Austria-Hungary. So he's Austro-Hungarian. He is not German. They speak German in Austria-Hungary. When he's 13 years old, his dad dies. So the abuse stops, yay! But now Mom is a single mom of 2 kids who can't find a job in this tiny little town. So she moves the family to Linz, L-I-N-Z, when he is just about 14. He's ready to turn 14. And he's the new kid in school, so he's a freshman, moves into a new school in a new town. Linz is a much bigger city, and he's shy, and he wants to fit in. And the thing about Linz that is just the way things were at the time is the city is incredibly anti-Semitic. They're a very anti-Jewish city. They're really mean to their Jews. And Hitler is brought into this at a very young age and agrees that the Jews are the root of all the problems, and now he fits in, so everything is great. Mom gets a job, she's working really hard, and Adolf is sent to school. His little sister, she's like the one he's got to protect. So he goes to school. Some of you can relate. He did really good in all the subjects he loved. Yeah, some of you. And then the subjects he hated, like math and science, he did very poorly. Some of you are like, oh, dude, I'm Hitler. So, subjects he loved, history. He was fascinated by military history, which a lot of people are. I mean, a lot of people love military history, the strategies that go behind it. You know, he thought the American Revolution was like the most amazing story ever. How a bunch of farmers like beat England, most powerful country in the world at the time. Just fascinated by the strategies in it and all of that. Love that, love history. But his favorite subject, hands down, was art. Art. He wanted to be an artist. That was his dream. He even wrote it in his diary that he wanted one day to own a museum where they would have rooms dedicated to all the great artists, you know, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Adolf Hitler, all the greats. All right? That's his dream. So at 16, he realized that, yeah, his grades weren't exactly going to get him a degree. So he decided to drop out of school. And Mom was like, you know, you have to. And he's like, Mom, I just don't care anymore. I'm going to be an artist. What do I need with school? I'm going to be an artist. What do I need with math? All right, I'm going to be an artist. So Mom's like, okay, honey. So she buys his art supplies. All he does is practice and practice and practice. And at 18, he's like, Mom, I'm really going to do this. I'm really going to do this. I have to move to Vienna. Vienna is the culture center, right? It's a big art place in Austria-Hungary. So at 18, he moves to Vienna, takes some money with him, gets himself a little studio, there he goes. And then 3 things happen to him. All right, you don't need to know all 3 of them. I have 1, 2, 3, but just so you know, first thing that might be the most traumatic is he applied for one of the most prestigious art academies in Vienna. And part of the application was you had to submit a work of art. all right? And then the board of directors would determine whether or not you qualify to fill one of the very few seats that they have available. I don't know how many seats were available. Even if it was like 100, I mean, they would get like thousands of applicants, and Adolf was one of them. So he submitted his piece of art. Board of directors reviewed it. And I mean, he was a much better artist than me, but then so is a 2-year-old, so that doesn't say anything. But compared to all the entries that they got, you know, he just doesn't, he didn't stand out. So he's, you know, waiting for that acceptance letter and waiting for that acceptance letter, like you will all be very soon, waiting for those acceptance letters, and waiting and waiting. Hopefully you will have better fate, because he got his letter, wasn't exactly an acceptance letter. It was like, dear Mr. Hitler, we're really sorry, but you did not get accepted. And he was just like devastated. Like, I don't understand. How can this be? Some of you, please, okay, you don't need to become a dictator, all right? You get a rejection letter. It's okay. But he didn't understand. He didn't understand. It couldn't be that his artwork wasn't one of the best they received. That cannot be. There has to be another reason. So he does a little digging, and then he finds out, no, the board of directors, yeah, almost all of them are Jewish. Now it all makes sense, right? There's your excuse for why he didn't get in. It's not that his art wasn't great. It's that they were trying to keep him from getting in. But he's not going to let them put him down this way. He'll show them. So he applies to architecture school. Architecture school. The math dropout applies to architecture school, gets a letter not accepting him, and it's like, I can't believe it. Really? High school dropout who failed his math classes doesn't get into architecture school. What? So he's trying to decide what to do with his life now, because his dreams have all just been destroyed by the Jews, by the way. When he gets another letter from his little sister, like, Adolf, you have to come home. You have to come home. Mom's dying. So he races home, and sure enough, she will die of breast cancer. And, you know, she dies in his arms at the hospital, and she's like, you know, take care of your sister, and he's like, I will, I promise, and he is just devastated. He doesn't know what to do with his life. So he makes sure his, like, little sister is taken care of. He like, pawns her off to, like, a family that can take care of her, as opposed to him, an 18-year-old kid. And he moves back to Vienna with the little money they had. He tries to be my sad face Hitler, right? Sad face for every reason, right? Didn't get into art school, didn't get into architecture school, mom's dead. He moves back to Vienna in hopes of just becoming a sidewalk artist and getting discovered. And so he goes there, and he's like doing his sidewalk art, trying to get discovered, and he's paying rent, and he's not selling enough art, and the money runs out, and they evict him, and now he is homeless. All of this turns him into what he becomes. So now that he is homeless, I mean, he really is the lowest you can go. Living in a homeless shelter, just, you know, this is life, this is his destiny, this is what the Jews did to him. But if you think of the time, he was born in 1889, and now it's like 1909 when he turns 20, 1921. He's homeless for 5 years. 1910, 1911, 1912, 1913. World War I begins in 1914 in Austria-Hungary. He is in Austria-Hungary. Just before the war literally erupts, just before the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his older wife Sophie, Austria-Hungary issues a mandatory draft of all men under the age of 25, and she is. And he is like this much interest in going to fight. Like, seriously, for skinny being homeless for 5 years, and then all these like big German boys. So he joins the military, German military. And he's actually really brave. Remember that night that he so much wanted to be like? That's still in his mind. Every volunteer mission, I need a volunteer to be a runner. That means you're going to jump up out of the trench and run to go get help. He volunteered for. It's like the most dangerous job. People are shooting at you because the enemy wants you dead. He's shot twice. He's awarded almost every medal you can think of for bravery. He's no coward. He's crazy. He's no coward. Alright? At least not here. Not yet. But towards the end of 1918, his battalion is hit with a chlorine gas bomb, and he loses his sight temporarily, and it affects his lungs. So while he's in a hospital recuperating for like 6 months, they sign the Versailles Treaty. He gets out, and he's like, we agreed to what? Oh, the new German government agreed to take all the blame for the war, to pay war reparations, to lose land to Poland, to lose land to France, to lose land, all their overseas colonies. And Hitler was like, we agreed to what? Like, better to die than to agree to such humiliation. But it's done. This new German government has done that. And Hitler's like, oh no. Now he knows his true calling. What he needs to do. I should tell you, he writes a poem. You don't have to write this down, but he writes this poem called Germania. And it's about a goddess named Germania. Oh no, it's called It Must Not Be. It's about Germania, a goddess who is being humiliated by all the other gods, and they're pouring ashes on her. And so she, a hero, emerges and rises her up out of the ashes and makes her into the most glorious of all goddesses. He wrote this poem, foreshadowing what he shall do. So, now he needs to find a political platform. He looks at all the political parties in Germany, and the one he joins is the one with the longest name. Not why he joined it, but it does really have the longest name. It is ready, the National Socialist German Workers Party. Seriously, National Socialist German Workers Party. Can you imagine? Where are you going to now? I'm going to a National Socialist German Workers Party. You want to come with me to the National Socialist German Workers Party meeting? That's too long. So the National Socialist German Workers Party gave themselves a short nickname so people could say it, and it's called the Nazi Party. It's a political party, like the Communist Party, Democrats, Republicans, Green Party, also Nazi Party. Hitler quickly becomes like their main speaker because he's such a good speaker. Like nobody realized the potential he had. He could motivate a crowd to do anything. In 1923, he took a bunch of drunk guys and said, "Hey, let's take over the government." And they all said, "Okay." And so they tried in 1923 to take over the government while they're all drinking. This is brilliant right there. So, of course, the takeover of the government building in Munich failed in 1923. They arrest all of them, but the leaders are the ones that matter. The rest drunks don't matter because, they're idiots. So they'll go to jail for the night and sober up. But whoever led this is a problem. And, of course, Hitler's the leader. So he's arrested and put on trial. This is treason. This is punishable by death, even in the United States. Today, it's punishable by death. So they put him on trial for treason. And then they made a fatal flaw. They're like, Mr. Hitler, do you have anything to say in your defense? Why, yes, I do. So he gets up there and he makes this powerful, emotional speech about all he was doing was to bring pride back to Germany and blah, 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 blah. And he had journalists crying. The judge is like, oh, well, that's still a very bad thing to do. So he is sentenced to, 15 years in prison. He serves like 9 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for trying to take over the government. And a lot of journalists wrote fabulous stories about him and his great speech. So while he's in jail, he's not just sit there and do nothing. He's going to write a book called My Struggle, or Mein Kampf in German, where he basically it's semi-autobiographical, where he talks about his past and his childhood and all of that. But then it talks about the future and what his plans are to do. And like the 3 main things you need to know that he does talk about in his book of what he plans to do is he plans to take back all the land that was stolen from Germany by those thieves in the Versailles Treaty. So he plans to get back all the land taken from Germany at the end of World War I. He also says he plans to take over more land and make his German Empire the greatest German Empire the world's ever seen, so Germany can achieve its destiny. So he's going to take over more land. And then, of course, he also mentions, although he doesn't say how he's going to do it, but he mentions how he plans to deal, or that he plans to deal with the people truly responsible for destroying Germany. He's going to deal with the Jews. He doesn't say how. It's not like I'm going to kill all the Jews. It's not in his book. All right, but he's going to deal with it. It's going to happen. So it's not like this is a bestseller. It's not Harry Potter. All right, so it's not like everybody rushed out to get this. Actually, it's like his friends and family and stuff like that. His sister bought a copy. All right, but he knows what he needs to do, and that is he needs to take over Germany. So in 1928, he runs for president. 1928, he runs for president and loses. So obviously, he hasn't built up enough support. But Germany's in a depression because we are already in a depression before Germany, and it's going to get worse in the 1930s. So he runs for president and loses. Spends the next 4 years like trying to gain more support. In 1932, he runs for president again against the same guy and loses again to the same guy. But the same guy's kind of a nice guy. Like, people like him. He's kind of this old, like, grandfather-looking guy. So von Hindenburg wins twice. But the thing about Germany is their political structure is slightly different. They have a president who's in charge of the executive branch, like we do. But then they have a chancellor who's in charge of the legislative branch, which we do not have. So they have a chancellor in charge of the legislature, and then they have a president in charge of, like, the military. And they're supposed to work together. So what happens that next year in 1933 is the chancellor, the guy in charge of the legislature, resigns. So in 1933, the chancellor resigns, and the Nazis in the legislature, they are not the majority, they convince the president that he should appoint Hitler. Because it was such a close election, people really like Hitler, you know, he's good for Germany, and the president's like, okay. So the president appoints Hitler as the new chancellor. So now Hitler is in charge of the legislature, but the Nazis don't have the majority. Then, mysteriously, 6 weeks later, there's a fire in the Reichstag, which is the parliament building, like where the Congress meets, or the legislature meets. There's a fire, it destroys the building. And interestingly enough, they arrest this really young Dutch communist as the one who, and he confesses, I did it. People were like, were you even there? He's like 19, like, were you there? He's like, it was all me, I did it. And so Hitler went to the president and said, you can't trust the communists. I think that we should suspend civil rights for now and arrest all the communists until we find out how deep this plan goes. And the president said, okay. So they suspend temporarily all civil rights and arrest all communists, which a number of them were in the Reichstag, in the legislature. So the fire in the legislature leads, who is a communist allegedly who does this, Hitler, all right, convinces the president to suspend civil rights so that they can arrest all the communists without problem. If nobody has civil rights, then we can arrest all the communists. And since a lot of them were in the legislature, that left a bunch of vacant seats in the legislature because they've been arrested. So Hitler, as the man in charge of the legislature, filled those seats with Nazis, who now have a majority in the legislature. Sweet. See, you're all learning how to become a successful leader, right? All right. So the empty seats then are filled by Nazis. Then the president died, and he actually does die legitimately. Hitler didn't kill him. The president died because he was old and he was having all kinds of health issues, and so he died, like legitimately died. And so Hitler went to the Reichstag, which is controlled by the Nazis, and said, hey, I think the idea of having two separate leaders here is stupid. We should just merge the office of the chancellor and the president into one. Let's vote on it. And all the Nazis were like, yes. Yeah. And then they voted on it, and so now they have merged the two offices into one, the office of the chancellor. And so now Adolf Hitler, the chancellor, is in charge of not only the legislature, but also the military. And that's how you become a dictator.